A large part of catching snapper offshore is working out where and when to best catch them. In many cases, the ocean gives us some of our best clues. For instance, the migration of whales very often tells us what those fish are about to do. As those big, beautiful animals start heading north in their annual migration, it usually means the snapper are getting ready to spawn as winter comes along. Then, as those whales complete their migration and head back south past your doorstep, it usually means the snapper are about to embark on their big springtime feed. This is a great time to start finding them close inshore on those reefs.
Nothing better than first drop on a spring morning. Not sure what's down there. Second later, thump, rod loads, drags a whaling. I'm fishing a stone's throw from the centre of the Gold Coast this morning, southeast corner of Queensland, bit of shallow reef country. And the thing that happens as that water starts to warm as you head into spring and the early summer months, that some of our bigger bumpy headed snapper start moving in close. A lot of people think that winter time's when we get a really good fish. A lot of the snapper guys in the know, and I tend to believe them now, reckon that spring and early summer is when the big guys come out of that spawning mode, getting close to feed. There's just such an abundance of food supply in the shallow reefs. There's lots of whiting and crab, and they come in to feed up after their spawning mayhem. And if you're in the right spot and you present well, bait or plastic, you can be in for some great fishing. Today, I'm having a bit of a play with the new Z-Man plastics. There's a big range of plastics hitting our shores now. I've heard some good things about them. I thought I'd give them a test, and so far, can't find anything wrong with them. Fishing pretty light today. I've got a 10-pound braid, 15-pound leader, little 4 to 7 kilo stick. Fish is waking up, I think he's seen the boat. Little Fluga arbor reel, Fluga Patriarch stick. It's really nice light stuff. It means you can feel everything that's going on. And all I did to catch that fish was fishing in 30 metres of water, some nice gravelly reef, and a bit of bommy comes up. And I'm casting ahead of the boat in a drift and just letting a plastic slowly drift down. And in case of just slowly mending line to watch what's going on. And the bite can be as simple as a bump and a slow load up of weight. It's a lot like bait fishing in that regard. It's a case of just let them take the weight up before you hit them with the rod, and then hold on. Okay, should have some colour for you fairly soon. That's where you really let your rod do a lot of the work. Beauty of fishing light rods are soft tips, is that they absorb a lot of fish bumping and head shaking, which means you don't tend to pull hooks as much. So that being the case, don't point your rod tip at a fish too much, really let your rod do the work. Oh, I spent a lot of time chasing snapper around the southeast corner, and there's nothing better than watching these big pink guys come up. Oh, bit of weight in that one. First fish of the morning. Oh, have a look at that. Little Z-Man 4-inch pink grub tucked away. Smell a snapper in the morning. I don't get sick of it. They are beautiful fish. You can see why so many people get addicted to fishing these, especially on plastics. They're such a majestic fish to look at. They fight so well. They obviously taste really good. And they're very aggressive when it comes to eating plastics and baits. Not sick of catching these guys yet. That's awesome. To have that line feeding out of your hands and suddenly it gets ripped out and starts travelling off at a rate of knots. I reckon I fish with a lot of snapper guys, and I reckon the reason they keep doing it is that addictive quality to have line ripped out of your hands as you're feeding a plastic down through the water column. Doesn't matter how big the fish is, it's just that exciting to suddenly get kicked into gear in that way. Makes you just keep coming back more and more for that sort of stuff. He's not a big fish, but tell you what, a bite, it can be a 1 kilo fish or a 10 kilo fish. They all bite the same way. They just rip that line off the reel when it's in free fall, and you've got to be tuned into it, because if you're not, you can miss a lot of fish. Squirry. You can see that little Z-Man plastic. They're a very durable plastic. They've also got a really soft quality, which a lot of guys fishing for a range of species are finding is very popular. The fish can eat it and not suspect there's anything wrong, and it's also very hardy, so they can get a lot of fish off one plastic. The nice thing about using curled tails, I'm a big fan of them, that they tend to, they slow the drift in the water. They also add that little motile vibration into the water, which attracts a lot of attention. And sometimes a trick to catching some good fish on any given day is to just present more slowly. Sometimes on your local jetty you can see the difference between throwing bread and bits of burley out and the fish get stuck into it. At the moment you put a big sinker on a bait and drop it through it, they'll have nothing to do with it. It's exactly by getting it drifting nice and slowly through the water column. Doesn't matter what fish you're fishing for, you can definitely fool fish, and very often the better fish. And that's a nice thing about using those curl tail grubs. Get him back in the water. See ya. I'm fishing with the Z-Man plastics today, and I've picked a nice small offering. I think sometimes, when the fish are really aggressive, they'll eat whatever, but sometimes when you're not too sure if they might be a bit fussy, I like going for a really small bite-sized plastic. It just sometimes makes it really easy for a fish to sip it in as it cruises past them. And the idea what we're doing here is casting ahead of the boat with a drift. I'm fishing a 3/8 ounce TT jig head to get it just drifting nice and slowly through the water column. Just mending my line as I go and watching to see if something picks it up on the drift. The idea being I'll cast ahead of the boat and I'll fish it right back behind me. And if I don't get anything on that first drift, cast again, and if I then move away from the ground, simply go back and do it all again. The line's coming back behind me now. I want to try and get it as close to bottom as I can. Beauty of using braided line is that you've got such good contact with the plastic. You can feel the moment the fish picks it up, the moment the lure hits the bottom, and you can start jigging it. Good idea sometimes to use nice visible braids. I'm using a code red braid at the moment. It's a spider wire line, but you can also use some of the yellows and greens, if particularly in the low light conditions where you want to see that line a bit better. Yep. A little squirry. Okay, so when you're drifting, because there's so much moving, you're moving, there's often a current moving, your jig head's moving through the water. It takes a little while to get the hang of. And I speak to a lot of anglers that start fishing with drifting and they give it away after a couple of goes because they just can't quite get their head around what's going on and they're not catching fish. It's one of those things where you just really got to stick at it and practice and start just getting good at knowing what weight jig head will get you to what depth in the water with different current and wind conditions. And after a while, if you do your homework and you get used to it, the moment you start getting those bites and that first few hookups, you're away. And it's a whole new ball game of fishing that does get addictive. Beware, wives and partners, you're going to be up for some money, but you can catch a whole lot of fish in a very exciting way. Little squire. Come back. It's a little lesson in that. When you're snapper fishing and you suddenly find that fish are starting to get hooked around the mouth, so you're almost foul hooking them, typically means that they're going into that slightly shut down mode, which they often do around the tide. Snapper will very often feed just as the tide starts to build and just before it starts to die out. And in those in-between stages when it's flowing hard, you can still catch them, but you often find they're a little bit more finicky, so they'll bump things out of their way and they'll eat the odd bit here and there, and you have to present really well to catch them. So I tend to find that when I do start hooking fish around the mouth, straight away it signals to me, A, they're in that mode where they're not that keen. So what I start doing is I go to smaller plastics and I often start downsizing my leaders. So by that I mean sometimes when I'm snapper fishing I'll go down to 10, 12 and occasionally, very occasionally go down to 8-pound leaders. And what it does is it just allows you to present that a little bit more naturally, and it can sometimes undo those finicky fish. part of catching any fish is finding them, and today I'm chasing snapper on the drift, and the first thing I've done is got out there to try and find the structure and then also signs of fish, either snapper arching or signs of bait that they might be feeding on. Having found that, I'm looking around and I'm seeing that which way the wind's going to push me and also which way the current might push me, and then I'm trying to set up strategic drifts so that I get the best line straight to that area and I can keep presenting my plastic to those fish. Having a sounder that shows you track lines is a real benefit when you are doing this stuff, because it does show you straight away where you're travelling in relation to where those fish are, and then if say you miss it on the first drift, it means you can come back, see where you've drifted and alter that line to get the next drift right. It just means that you're optimising where you're putting that lure at any given time. Within the Z-Man range, you'll find a whole variety of sizes and colours of soft plastic. In my opinion, it's worth having a variety of your sizes just to reflect the different kinds of bait you might find on any given day in the water. And then don't get too caught up in the colours. If you want to go to the nth degree, you can have 10 different colours in just about every soft plastic out there, but I find to simplify it a little bit, if you can have a nice natural colour, your silvers and your greens, and then you can also have a nice bright colour like your chartreuses and your pinks, and then you tend to cover a lot of those different water light conditions. Oh, how good's that on the drop? That fish has just smashed that. Oh, come on, get up, get up, get up, get up, get up, get up. Oh, keep getting up, come on, come on, come on, get up, get up. Oh, it's one of those moments I just started taking in the scenery, looking somewhere else. As this plastic was sinking, it just got slammed, just about pulled the rod out of my hand. How good's that? Oh. Up off the bottom now, which is good. Fishing sort of light, you know, I'm fishing 15-pound leader. You always get a bit nervy when they start heading for ground, but just got to hold your nerve and just keep that rod steady and back yourself to slowly get them up off the bottom. Whew. Something else happened there too. The sun's got up a bit and the light obviously has changed in the water. And I was fishing a bit of a more brightly coloured plastic this morning just to give it more profile. I've gone to a more natural colour now. It's more of a bait fish green. Same sort of plastic, a little grub, a little Z-Man grub. Fish on a 1/2 ounce jig head, and the colour change seems to have worked. We get caught up a lot in colours sometimes. I just like having something really bright in there to give you that contrast and lower light. And then also a really nice natural bait fish colour, which can sometimes undo good fish when they just get a little bit subtle on the bite. This is a really nice red, look at this. Oh, look at this. Lovely. Oh, there we go, a little natural bait fish colour grub. A little 1/2 ounce jig head. This is a nice average size springtime or early summertime snapper in southeast Queensland. If you get your plastics right or your bait fishing right, you're well on the money for catching some good fish like this. And in the background there you can hear some whales thumping around on their way back south, and it's usually key time when those whales start heading back home. You know, it's time to start getting into some of those shallow waters, those 30 to 10 metre water depths, and start hunting snapper like this. You get it right, there's a whole lot of fun to be had. One little thing when you're fishing plastics for snapper, up, sometimes you hook other big ooglies. Bit of a predator that shares the waters with the snapper in these parts Here's the old yellowtail king. He's an absolute sucker for plastics, and I've been done over by a couple this morning already, but finally been able to win one battle to get this guy. Just saw a few sounding up behind a decent bommy, and there's a bit of current running, so put on a slightly heavier jig head and targeted one of these in particular, and I've just bounced a little 5-inch Z-Man down behind that bommy and whack. Thanks for coming. I'm glad I've only caught one, I reckon, because I'm puffing enough after that. They're absolute mongrels when it comes to fighting dirty. And a light gear, you earn every one that you put in the boat like this.
It's Bill Klassen here from The Fishing Show, and if you like this instructional video and want to learn more, it's simple. Go to fishingshowtv.com.au and see a whole host of additional videos.